So in this sequence of video, we'll explain our solution, the Trifecta protocol, to the trilemma. In the first video, we'll first explain what is the problem of the longest chain protocol, which is the most basic blockchain protocol used in a lot of blockchain projects, including Bitcoin and Ethereum. We'll explain why there's a trade-off between security and scalability, which is intrinsic to the longest chain protocol. Then in the next video, we'll introduce a method called block graph factorization, which allows us to remove entirely this trade-off, thus achieving simultaneously full security, full decentralization, and vertical scalability. That is, we can scale the throughput and the latency up to the physical limits imposed by the participating nodes of the network. Then, in the third video in the sequence, we will extend this block graph factorization approach to devise a completely new sharding protocol, which also allows us to attain horizontal scalability in addition to vertical scalability. So let's start with the longest chain protocol. So in the longest chain protocol, blocks are being appended to grow the longest chain. The blocks serve two purposes in the longest chain protocol. First, the blocks contain transactions which are being added into the ledger maintained by the longest chain. Second, blocks, when they get appended to the longest chain, implicitly vote for the previous block. That is because in the longest chain protocol, transactions get confirmed when they get deep into the longest chain. So implicitly, the blocks that come in afterwards are voting for the blocks that already been in the chain. And when a block gets enough votes, for example, 6 votes, that is when it's 6 deep, then it gets confirmed. So you can see that the latency and the throughput depends on a crucial parameter, which is the mining rate, or the rate at which blocks are generated. The latency depends on the mining rate because it is waiting for a certain number of blocks to confirm. The slower the mining rate, the slower the latency. The transaction also depends on the mining rate because it measures the rate at which transactions enter into the ledger. So a natural way of improving the throughput and the latency of the longest chain protocol is to increase the mining rate. That is, to make the puzzle easier so that more blocks are generated per unit time. So now let's see what happens when we increase the mining rate. So as we increase the mining rate, blocks are generated faster. And since we have a decentralized network, what happens is that now multiple blocks will get appended to the block tree simultaneously, resulting in forking. That is, many blocks are mined off a single block. The crucial problem with forking is that it effectively slows down the growth of the longest chain. One can visualize that the work is being split across different forks, and therefore the longest chain will not grow as fast as the mining rate would allow it. This reduces the security of the longest chain protocol because an adversary which can generate blocks at the same location can now increase its rate and thereby destroys the security of the system. So the conclusion is that forking reduces security. And thus, one can see a trade-off between security and scalability. To increase throughput and to reduce latency, seemingly one has to reduce the security. And that is one reason why people believe that the trilemma is true. The question is this trade-off fundamental trade-off, or is it intrinsic to the longest chain protocol?